The rain came down in sheets, blurring the neon lights of the small town street, but inside Lila's place, the air was warm with the scent of fresh bread and simmering tomato sauce. Clara stood frozen behind the counter, her hands trembling as she clutched a worn photograph of her daughter, Lila, whose smile had once lit up this very room. Tonight, the restaurant her parents built to honor her memory felt heavier than ever, until the bell above the door chimed, and a ghost walked in. Clara's heart stopped. The woman who entered was soaked from the rain, her short, tousled brown hair clinging to her forehead, but it was her eyes, those piercing green eyes, that made Clara's knees buckle. They were Lila's eyes, unmistakably, though the woman carried herself with a stranger's weight, her leather jacket scuffed and her boots worn. She slid into a booth, oblivious to the storm she just ignited in Clara's chest, and ordered a plate of spaghetti with a voice that cracked like it hadn't been used in years. Clara's husband, Tom, emerged from the kitchen, his apron dusted with flour. He followed her gaze and froze, the color draining from his face. "Clara," he whispered, "that's not possible." They had buried Lila 3 years ago, after a car accident that shattered their world. Her girlfriend, Emma, had been in the car too, but she survived, barely, and vanished from their lives soon after. This restaurant, Lila's place, was their way of keeping their daughter's spirit alive, a tribute to her dream of owning a cozy Italian eatery where everyone felt like family. But now a woman who could be Lila's twin sat in their booth, stirring memories they'd fought to bury. Clara forced herself to move, her hands shaking as she carried the plate of spaghetti to the table. "Here you go," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. The woman looked up, and for a moment their eyes locked. There was no recognition in her gaze, only a quiet exhaustion, but Clara's heart screamed that this was her daughter. She wanted to reach out, to demand answers, but the woman just nodded and began to eat, her movements slow and deliberate, like someone who'd forgotten how to savor a meal. Tom pulled Clara back to the counter, his voice low and urgent. "It's not her, Clara. It can't be. We saw the body. We held her funeral." His words were meant to ground her, but they only fueled the fire in her chest. She didn't care about logic. She didn't care about the coroner's report or the closed casket. Something in her gut told her this woman was connected to Lila, and she wasn't letting her walk out without answers. The restaurant was quiet that night, save for the soft clink of forks and the hum of the old jukebox playing Ella Fitzgerald. Clara watched the woman eat, her mind racing. Lila had been 25 when she died, vibrant and unapologetic, her love for Emma a fierce, beautiful thing that had challenged Clara and Tom's small-town sensibilities. They'd struggled to understand their daughter's identity, but Lila's warmth and persistence had softened their hearts. When she died, they'd poured their grief into this restaurant, decorating it with her favorite things: fairy lights, vintage records, and a chalkboard menu that mimicked her handwriting. Every detail was a piece of her. Until now, when a stranger threatened to unravel it all. The woman finished her meal and left a crumpled 20 on the table. As she stood to leave, Clara's resolve broke. "Wait," she called, her voice louder than she intended. The woman turned, her expression guarded. "Do I know you?" Clara asked, stepping closer. The woman's brow furrowed, and for a split second, something flickered in her eyes, confusion, maybe fear. "No," she said softly. "I don't think so." But her voice carried a tremor that made Clara's heart race. She was lying. Or hiding something. Tom placed a hand on Clara's shoulder, a silent plea to let it go, but she couldn't. "What's your name?" she pressed. The woman hesitated, her fingers tightening around the strap of her bag. "Ellie," she said finally, the name falling like a stone between them. Clara's breath caught. It wasn't Lila's name, but it was close enough to twist the knife in her chest. Before she could say more, Ellie turned and slipped out into the rain, leaving Clara staring at the empty booth. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She sat at the kitchen table in their apartment above the restaurant, the photograph of Lila clutched in her hands. Tom sat across from her, his eyes red from exhaustion. "We need to find her," Clara said, her voice fierce. "If there's even a chance." Tom shook his head, but his resolve was weakening. "Clara, we can't chase ghosts. What if she's just someone who looks like her? But Clara wasn't listening. She was already planning, her mind racing with possibilities. She would track this woman down. She would find out who she was and why she'd come to Lila's place. The next morning, Clara opened the restaurant early, her eyes scanning every customer who walked in. She didn't know if Ellie would return, but she felt it in her bones she would. Meanwhile, she began asking around town, discreetly at first. Had anyone seen a woman with short brown hair and green eyes? Had anyone heard of someone named Ellie? The answers were vague, unhelpful, but Clara didn't care. She had a purpose now, a spark of hope that felt dangerously close to madness. By midday, the restaurant was bustling, and Clara was distracted, her thoughts consumed by the stranger. That's when the door chimed again, and another familiar face walked in, Emma, Lila's old girlfriend. Clara's heart lurched. Emma looked different, her long blonde hair now streaked with gray, her face etched with lines that hadn't been there 3 years ago. She carried herself with a quiet strength, but her eyes were haunted. "Clara," Emma said, her voice soft but steady. "I heard about last night. I think we need to talk." Clara's hands trembled as she led Emma to a quiet corner of the restaurant. "You saw her too?" she asked, barely able to get the words out. Emma nodded, her expression unreadable. "I don't know who she is, Clara, but I saw her leaving last night. And I swear for a moment I thought it was Lila." The words hung between them, heavy with possibility. Clara's mind raced. If Emma, who had loved Lila so fiercely, felt the same pull, then maybe she wasn't crazy. Maybe this woman, this Ellie, was the key to unraveling a truth they'd all been too broken to face. Emma sat across from Clara in the dimly lit corner of Lila's place, her hands wrapped tightly around a mug of coffee. The restaurant hummed around them, but their table felt like a bubble, sealed off from the chatter and clatter of plates. Clara leaned forward, her voice low. "Tell me everything, Emma. What did you see last night?" Emma's eyes flickered with something Clara couldn't quite read, grief maybe or fear. "I was across the street picking up groceries," she began, her voice steady but laced with tension. "I saw her walk out of here, Clara. She looked she looked so much like Lila. The way she moved, the way her hair fell across her face. But it wasn't just that. It was the way she paused at the door, like she was remembering something she couldn't quite grasp." Clara's heart pounded. "Did you follow her?" Emma nodded, her lips pressing into a thin line. "I tried. She got into a beat-up old truck and drove off before I could catch up. I didn't get a license plate, but I saw the direction she went. Toward the old mill road." Clara's mind raced. The mill road led to a stretch of abandoned warehouses and cheap motels. A place where people went to disappear. If this Ellie was hiding, that's where she'd be. Tom appeared at their table, his face etched with worry. "Emma," he said, his voice gruff but kind. "You sure you're not just seeing what you want to see? We all miss her." Emma's jaw tightened, and Clara could see the old fire in her. The same fire that had made Lila fall so hard for her. "I'm not imagining this, Tom," Emma said. "I loved her. I knew her better than anyone. That woman last night, she's connected to Lila somehow. I feel it." Clara reached across the table, gripping Emma's hand. "Then we find her," she said, her voice fierce. "Together." Tom sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "Clara, this is crazy. We don't even know who this woman is. She could be dangerous." But Clara wasn't listening. She hadn't felt this alive since Lila's death, this driven. For the first time in 3 years, she had something to hold on to. A mystery, a hope, however fragile. That afternoon, Clara and Emma set out for the mill road. The rain had stopped, leaving the air heavy and the streets slick. Clara drove, her hands tight on the wheel, while Emma scanned the road for any sign of the truck. "What do we even say if we find her?" Emma asked, breaking the tense silence. Clara didn't have an answer. She didn't know if she'd scream, cry, or beg for the truth. All she knew was that she needed to see Ellie again, to look into those green eyes and find out why they felt like home. The mill road was as desolate as Clara remembered, lined with crumbling buildings and overgrown lots. They parked near a rundown motel with a flickering neon sign that read vacancy. Emma pointed to a rusty blue truck parked in the lot. "That's it," she whispered. Clara's pulse quickened. They approached the motel office, where a bored clerk barely looked up from his phone. "Looking for a woman," Clara said, describing Ellie. The clerk shrugged. "Room 12. Don't cause trouble." Room 12 was at the far end of the motel, its door chipped and faded. Clara knocked, her heart in her throat. No answer. She knocked again, harder, and finally the door cracked open. Ellie stood there, her eyes wary, her hair damp from a recent shower. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice sharp but unsteady. Clara opened her mouth, but no words came. Emma stepped forward, her voice soft. "We just want to talk. You were at our restaurant last night. Lila's place." Ellie's expression didn't change, but her fingers tightened on the doorframe. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said. But there was a crack in her voice, a hint of something unspoken. Clara's desperation spilled over. "You look like her," she blurted. "You look like my daughter." Ellie's eyes widened, and for a moment, Clara thought she saw a flash of recognition. But then Ellie shook her head. "You've got the wrong person," she said and slammed the door. Clara stood frozen, her breath ragged. Emma touched her arm. "She's hiding something," Emma said quietly. "We can't give up." They returned to the car, but Clara couldn't shake the image of Ellie's face, the way her eyes had flickered with something like fear. Back at the restaurant, Clara pored over old photos of Lila, searching for clues. She pulled out Lila's journal, which she'd kept hidden since the accident. The pages were filled with Lila's dreams of opening a restaurant, her love for Emma, her frustration with her parents' slow acceptance. But there was nothing about anyone named Ellie. That night, the restaurant was packed, but Clara's mind was elsewhere. She kept glancing at the door, half expecting Ellie to walk in again. Emma stayed late, helping with dishes, her presence a quiet comfort. "I never stopped loving her," Emma said suddenly, her voice barely audible over the clatter of plates. Clara paused, her hands in soapy water. "I know," she said softly. "And I know she loved you too." It was the first time Clara had acknowledged Emma's place in Lila's life so openly, and the words felt like a bridge between them. As they closed up, Clara made a decision. "Tomorrow we go back to the motel," she said. "We're not letting this go." Emma nodded, her eyes fierce with determination. They didn't know what they were chasing. A ghost, a coincidence, or something else entirely. But they were in it together now, bound by their love for Lila and the mystery of the woman who wore her face. The morning sun barely pierced the fog as Clara and Emma drove back to the motel, the silence between them thick with unspoken questions. Clara's hands gripped the steering wheel, her mind replaying Ellie's guarded expression, the way her voice had faltered. She wasn't ready to believe this was just a coincidence. Not when every instinct screamed that Ellie was more than a stranger. They parked near room 12, the blue truck still in the lot. Clara's heart raced as they approached the door, but before she could knock, it swung open. Ellie stood there, a duffel bag slung over her shoulder, her face pale and tense. "You again," she said, her voice low. "I told you you've got the wrong person." But her eyes darted to the side, betraying her calm. "We just want to understand," Emma said, stepping forward. Her voice was gentle but firm, the same tone she'd used to calm Lila during their fiercest arguments. "You look like someone we loved, someone we lost. Can you at least tell us who you are?" Ellie's jaw tightened, and for a moment, Clara thought she might bolt. But then she sighed, her shoulders slumping. "Fine. But not here." They followed her to a diner down the road, a greasy spoon with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that tasted like regret. Ellie sat across from them, her fingers tracing the rim of her mug. "My name's Ellie Carter," she said finally. "I'm just passing through. I don't know you and I don't know your daughter." But there was something in her tone, a hesitation that made Clara's skin prickle. "Where are you from?" Clara asked, leaning in. Ellie's eyes flickered. "Nowhere important. I move around." Emma's voice was soft but piercing. "You moved like her. You even ordered her favorite meal. Spaghetti with marinara, no cheese." Ellie froze, her mug halfway to her lips. "It's just spaghetti," she said, but her voice was too sharp, too defensive. Clara's heart pounded. Lila loved that dish. She said it was the taste of home. Ellie's gaze dropped to the table, and for the first time, Clara saw something crack in her facade. "I'm not her," Ellie said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't be." But the words carried a weight that made Clara's breath catch. She wanted to push, to demand answers, but Emma's hand on her arm stopped her. "Why are you running?" Emma asked instead, her voice gentle. Ellie's eyes snapped up and Clara saw it again, that flicker of fear or maybe guilt. "I'm not running," Ellie said, but she stood abruptly, tossing a few bills on the table. "I have to go." Clara and Emma followed her outside, the cold air biting at their skin. "Ellie, wait," Clara called, her voice breaking. Ellie stopped but didn't turn. "Please," Clara said. "If you know something about Lila, anything, tell us. We're her parents. We loved her." Ellie's shoulders tensed, and when she finally turned, her eyes were wet. "I'm sorry for your loss," she said, her voice raw. "But I'm not who you think I am." She walked away, her boots crunching on the gravel, and climbed into her truck. Clara's knees buckled but Emma caught her. "She's lying," Clara whispered. "She knows something." Emma's face was grim, but she nodded. "We need to find out more about her. She's not telling us everything." They drove back to Lila's place in silence, Clara's mind a storm of questions. Who was Ellie Carter? Why did she look so much like Lila? And why did she seem so haunted? Back at the restaurant, Clara dove into Lila's journal again, searching for any mention of someone named Ellie. She found nothing, but the pages were filled with Lila's love for life, her dreams, her struggles. One entry caught Clara's eye. "Sometimes I feel like I'm two people. One for the world, one for me. I wish I could just be both." Clara's throat tightened. Had Lila been hiding something? Someone? Emma, meanwhile, was on her phone digging into public records. "There's no Ellie Carter in this county," she said, her brow furrowed. "At least, not one who matches her description. But I found something else." She turned her phone to Clara, showing a grainy photo from a local news article about a car accident 3 years ago. The one that killed Lila. In the background, barely noticeable, was a figure with short brown hair, standing near the wreckage. Clara's heart stopped. It looked like Ellie. "Was she there?" Clara whispered. Emma shook her head. "I don't know. The article doesn't mention her. But if she was at the scene," she trailed off, her eyes meeting Clara's. "They didn't need to say it. If Ellie had been there, she knew more about Lila's death than they did. Maybe she'd even been involved." That night, Clara couldn't sleep, her mind consumed by the photo. She and Tom had never questioned the official report. Lila had lost control on a rainy night, her car plunging into a ravine. Emma had been in the passenger seat, barely surviving. But what if there was more to the story? What if Ellie held the missing piece? Clara made a decision. She would confront Ellie again no matter what it took. She owed it to Lila. As the restaurant closed, Emma stayed behind, her presence a quiet anchor. "We'll find her," she said, her voice steady. "And we'll find the truth." Clara nodded, her heart heavy but resolute. They were chasing a ghost, but for the first time in 3 years, Clara felt like Lila was still with them, guiding them toward answers they didn't yet understand. Clara woke before dawn, her dreams haunted by Lila's laugh and Ellie's guarded eyes. She slipped downstairs to the restaurant, where the fairy lights cast soft shadows on the walls. Lila's place felt alive in the quiet, as if her daughter's spirit lingered in the worn wooden tables and the chalkboard menu. But today, Clara wasn't here to mourn. She was here to fight for answers. Emma arrived early, her face set with determination. She'd spent the night digging deeper, cross-referencing old police reports and social media posts from the time of the accident. "I found something," she said, spreading papers across the table. "The accident report mentions a witness who saw a second car near the scene, but they never identified the driver. No one followed up." Clara's pulse quickened. "You think it was Ellie?" Emma's eyes were dark. "I think it's possible." They decided to return to the motel, but first Clara pulled Tom aside. "I need you to trust me," she said, her voice trembling with urgency. Tom's face was a mask of worry, but he nodded. "I don't like this, Clara, but I'm with you." His support, however reluctant, gave her strength. She and Emma drove back to the mill road, the air thick with tension. The blue truck was gone and room 12 was empty, the clerk confirming Ellie had checked out at dawn. Clara's heart sank, but Emma was undeterred. "She can't have gone far," she said, scanning the lot. They drove through the nearby streets, checking gas stations and diners, but Ellie was nowhere. Desperation clawed at Clara's chest. She couldn't lose her, not again. Back at the restaurant they regrouped, poring over Emma's notes. "There's a bar on the edge of town," Emma said. "It's a place where people go to lay low. If Ellie's still around, she might be there." The bar was a dive, its neon sign buzzing faintly in the twilight. Inside, the air was thick with cigarette smoke and the low hum of conversation. Clara's eyes scanned the room, and there she was, Ellie sitting alone at the bar, nursing a beer. Her leather jacket was slung over the stool, her posture slouched but tense, like she was ready to run. Clara's heart pounded as she approached, Emma close behind. "Ellie," Clara said, her voice cutting through the noise. Ellie's head snapped up, her eyes narrowing. "You don't give up, do you?" "We can't," Clara said, sliding onto the stool beside her. "Not until you tell us the truth." Ellie's gaze flickered to Emma, then back to Clara. "I told you, I'm not who you think I am." But her voice was unsteady, and Clara saw the cracks in her armor. "Then why do you look like her?" Clara pressed. "Why were you at Lila's place? Why did you order her favorite meal?" Ellie's fingers tightened around her bottle, her knuckles white. Emma leaned in, her voice soft but unrelenting. "You were there, weren't you? The night of the accident. I saw you in the photo." Ellie's face went pale, and for a moment Clara thought she might bolt. But then she sighed, her shoulders slumping. "You don't understand," she whispered. "It's complicated." Clara's heart raced. "Then make us understand," she said. "Please." Ellie took a long swig of her beer, her eyes distant. "I knew Lila," she said finally, her voice barely audible. "Not well, but I knew her. We met a few months before the accident. She was kind to me. Kinder than most." Clara's breath caught. "How?" she asked. Ellie's gaze dropped to the bar. "I was in a bad place. Lila helped me out, gave me a place to crash for a couple of nights. She talked about you, her parents, her dreams. She loved you both, even when you didn't get her." Clara's eyes burned with tears. She could hear Lila's voice in Ellie's words, the way she'd always seen the best in people. "What happened that night?" Emma asked, her voice trembling. Ellie's jaw tightened. "I wasn't in the car. I swear. But I was there on the road. I saw it happen." Her voice broke and she looked away. "I saw the other car, the one that ran her off the road. I tried to help, but it was too late." Clara's world tilted. "There was another car," she whispered. Ellie nodded, her eyes haunted. "I didn't stick around. I was scared. I had my own problems, my own reasons to stay under the radar." "I'm sorry." Clara's mind reeled. All this time they believed it was an accident, a tragic twist of fate. But if Ellie was telling the truth, someone else was responsible for Lila's death. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" Emma asked, her voice sharp with pain. Ellie's eyes met hers, raw and unguarded. "I was a coward," she said simply. "I didn't think anyone would believe me. I still don't." Clara reached out, her hand trembling as she touched Ellie's arm. "We believe you," she said, her voice fierce. "And we're going to find out who did this." Ellie pulled away, her expression torn. "I can't stay," she said. "I've already said too much." But Clara wasn't letting her go. "You're part of this now," she said. "You owe it to Lila." Ellie's eyes searched hers, and for the first time, Clara saw something like resolve. "Meet me tomorrow," Ellie said finally. "I'll tell you what I know. But after that, I'm gone." As Ellie left the bar, Clara and Emma sat in stunned silence. The truth was closer than ever, but it came with a price. A truth that could unravel everything they thought they knew about Lila's death. And Clara was ready to pay it. Clara barely slept, her mind a tangle of Ellie's words and the weight of a truth she wasn't sure she was ready to face. Lila's place opened at dawn, but Clara's heart wasn't in the clatter of pots or the chatter of early customers. She kept glancing at the door, waiting for Ellie to keep her promise. Emma sat at the counter, her laptop open, combing through old news articles and police reports, her face set with a determination Clara hadn't seen since Lila's funeral. Tom moved quietly around the kitchen, his usual warmth replaced by a tense silence. "You sure about this, Clara?" he asked, pausing to wipe his hands on his apron. "What if this Ellie is just stringing us along?" Clara met his eyes, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "Then we'll know. But if she's telling the truth, Tom, we owe it to Lila to find out what really happened." The door chimed at noon and Ellie walked in, her leather jacket slung over one shoulder, her eyes scanning the room like a cornered animal. She slid into a booth and Clara and Emma joined her, the air between them crackling with tension. "I don't have long," Ellie said, her voice low. "I meant what I said. I'll tell you what I know, but then I'm out." Clara nodded, her hands clasped tightly under the table. "Just tell us." Ellie leaned back, her gaze distant. "That night, I was driving behind Lila's car. I'd been staying at her place for a few days trying to get my life together. She was giving me a ride to the bus station." Her voice faltered and she took a shaky breath. "It was raining hard and the roads were slick. I saw a black SUV come up fast behind her. It didn't slow down. It clipped her car, sent it spinning. I pulled over and ran to help, but the SUV was gone and Lila's car was." She stopped, her eyes wet. "I couldn't get to her. The ravine was too steep, and the car was a wreck." Clara's chest tightened, her mind flashing to the coroner's report. Skid marks, no mention of another vehicle. "Why didn't you tell the police?" she asked, her voice shaking. Ellie's jaw clenched. "I was on parole. I'd been in trouble before, petty stuff but enough to make me a bad witness. I didn't think anyone would listen to me. And I was scared. The SUV, it didn't feel like an accident. It felt personal." Emma's eyes narrowed. "Personal how?" Ellie hesitated, her fingers drumming on the table. "Lila told me she'd been getting threats. Anonymous notes, calls in the middle of the night. She thought it was because of who she was, her relationship with you." She looked at Emma, her expression heavy. "She didn't want to worry you, so she kept it quiet. But she was scared." Clara's world tilted. Lila, her fearless daughter, had been afraid? And she'd never said a word. Guilt clawed at her, sharp and relentless. "Why didn't she tell us?" she whispered. Ellie's eyes softened. "She didn't want to burden you. She said you were just starting to accept her, to accept Emma. She didn't want to ruin that." Clara's throat burned, tears spilling over. All this time she'd thought she knew her daughter, but there were pieces of Lila she'd never seen. Emma's voice was steady, but her hands trembled. "Do you know who was driving the SUV?" Ellie shook her head. "I didn't see the driver. Just the car, black, no plates, tinted windows. I tried to memorize it, but I was panicking." She paused, her voice dropping. "But I heard something later. Rumors. There was a guy in town, someone with money, who didn't like Lila. Didn't like what she represented. I don't know his name, but people said he had pull. Enough to make things disappear." Clara's blood ran cold. Their town was small, conservative, and while most had warmed to Lila's place, there were always whispers, judgmental glances. Could someone have hated Lila enough to kill her? Emma's face was pale, but her eyes burned with resolve. "We need to find that SUV," she said. "And we need to find out who was driving it." Ellie stood, slinging her jacket over her shoulder. "That's all I know. I'm sorry I didn't do more back then. But I'm not sticking around to relive it." Clara grabbed her arm, desperate. "Please, Ellie. Help us. For Lila." Ellie's eyes searched hers, and for a moment Clara thought she saw Lila in them. Not just in their color, but in their depth, their pain. "I'll think about it," Ellie said finally. "But don't follow me again." She walked out, leaving Clara and Emma staring at the empty booth. That night, Clara and Emma sat in the restaurant's back office, surrounded by Lila's things. Her journal, her photos, a scarf she'd left behind. Emma traced her fingers over a picture of her and Lila, laughing at a county fair. "I should have known," she whispered. "I should have seen she was scared." Clara reached for her hand, their grief a shared weight. "We'll find the truth," she said. For her. They spent hours piecing together what they knew, cross-referencing Ellie's story with the accident report. Clara called an old friend at the sheriff's office, asking discreet questions about the case. He was hesitant but promised to look into it. As the night wore on, Clara felt a fire growing inside her. A need to protect Lila's memory, to uncover the truth, no matter how painful. She and Emma were bound now, not just by love for Lila, but by a mission that felt bigger than both of them. The restaurant felt different now, its warmth overshadowed by the weight of Ellie's revelation. Clara moved through the motions of serving customers, her smile mechanical, her mind consumed by the black SUV and the faceless driver who'd stolen Lila's life. Emma stayed close, her laptop a constant companion as she dug deeper into the town's underbelly, searching for any hint of the man Ellie had mentioned. By mid-afternoon, Clara's friend from the sheriff's office called back. "There's nothing official about another car," he said, his voice cautious. "But I talked to one of the first responders. He remembers a witness mentioning a dark SUV speeding away, but it never made it into the report. Things got messy back then." Clara's heart sank. "Messy how?" she pressed. He hesitated. There was pressure to close the case quickly. From higher up. That's all I'll say. Clara hung up, her hands shaking. Pressure from higher up? In their small town, that could only mean a handful of people, someone with money, influence, and a grudge. She shared the call with Emma, who nodded grimly. "We need to talk to Ellie again," she said. "She knows more than she's letting on." But Ellie hadn't returned to the restaurant, and her truck was nowhere to be found. Clara's hope flickered, but she refused to let it die. That evening, a regular customer, an older woman named Ruth who'd known Lila since she was a child, pulled Clara aside. "I heard you've been asking questions," Ruth said, her voice low. "About Lila's accident." Clara's pulse quickened. "Do you know something?" Ruth's eyes darted around the restaurant. Then she leaned in. "There was talk back then about a man who didn't like Lila's lifestyle. He's got a big house up on Maple Hill. Drives a black SUV. Name's Richard Hale." Clara's blood ran cold. Richard Hale was a local businessman, wealthy and well-connected, with a reputation for his conservative views. He'd never set foot in Lila's place, but Clara remembered the way he'd glared at Lila and Emma at a town festival years ago, his disapproval palpable. Could he have hated Lila enough to hurt her? She thanked Ruth and found Emma, relaying the name. Emma's face hardened. "We need to find him." They drove to Maple Hill, a quiet street lined with manicured lawns and sprawling homes. Hale's house was at the end, a modern monstrosity of glass and stone. A black SUV sat in the driveway, its tinted windows gleaming in the dusk. Clara's heart pounded as they parked across the street, watching the house. "What do we do?" she whispered. Emma's jaw was set. "We watch. We wait. If he's guilty, he'll slip up." Hours passed, the night growing colder. Just as Clara's resolve began to waver, the garage door opened, and the SUV pulled out. They followed at a distance, the tension in the car thick enough to choke on. The SUV led them to a warehouse on the edge of town, a place Clara had never seen. Hale parked and went inside, his movements quick and purposeful. "What's he doing here?" Emma muttered. Before Clara could answer, another car pulled up, a rusty blue truck. "Ellie." Clara's breath caught as Ellie stepped out, glancing around before slipping into the warehouse. "What the hell is she doing?" Emma hissed. Clara's mind raced. Was Ellie working with Hale? Or was she confronting him? They crept closer, staying low, and peered through a grimy window. Inside, Ellie stood face to face with Hale, her posture tense, her voice too low to hear. Hale's face was red, his gestures sharp, and Clara's stomach twisted. This wasn't a friendly meeting. "We need to get in there," Clara whispered, but Emma grabbed her arm. "Wait. We don't know what's happening." Before they could decide, a shout echoed from inside, followed by the sound of something heavy hitting the floor. Clara's heart stopped. She didn't think. She ran to the door, Emma close behind. Inside, Ellie was on her knees, clutching her side, while Hale loomed over her, a crowbar in his hand. "You should have stayed gone," he growled. Clara didn't hesitate. She grabbed a metal pipe from a pile of junk and swung, catching Hale's arm. He stumbled, cursing, and Emma tackled him, pinning him to the ground. "Call the police," Emma shouted, and Clara fumbled for her phone, her hands shaking as she dialed 911. Ellie staggered to her feet, blood seeping through her shirt. "I'm okay," she gasped, but her face was pale. He admitted it. To everything. The police arrived quickly, their sirens cutting through the night. Hale was cuffed, his face a mask of rage, while paramedics tended to Ellie. Clara knelt beside her, tears streaming down her face. "Why didn't you tell us you were meeting him?" she asked. Ellie's eyes were heavy with pain. "I wanted to protect you, like Lila did." Clara's heart broke at the words, at the truth she was only beginning to understand. As Hale was led away, he spat venomous words confirming what Ellie had said. He'd hated Lila, hated what she stood for, and had run her off the road in a drunken rage. The police took Ellie's statement, her voice steady despite her injury. She tracked Hale down, hoping to get a confession, but hadn't expected him to turn violent. Clara and Emma listened, their grief and anger mingling with a strange sense of relief. The truth was out, but it came at a cost. Back at Lila's place, Clara held Emma's hand, their shared pain a quiet bond. Ellie was in the hospital, but she'd promised to return, and Clara believed her. For Lila they would keep fighting, keep loving, keep her memory alive. The hospital room was quiet, save for the soft beep of monitors and the faint hum of fluorescent lights. Clara sat beside Ellie's bed, her hands clasped tightly, while Emma stood by the window, staring out at the dawn breaking over the town. Ellie's side was bandaged, her face pale but calm. The weight of her secrets finally lifted. "I'm sorry I ran," she said, her voice hoarse. "I thought it was better if you didn't know." Clara shook her head, tears brimming. "You brought us the truth. That's more than we ever hoped for." Ellie's eyes, so like Lila's, softened. "She deserved better," she said. "She was the only one who ever saw me, really saw me. I owed her this." Clara reached for her hand, squeezing gently. "You're not alone anymore," she said, and for the first time Ellie didn't pull away. The police had taken Richard Hale into custody, his confession recorded by Ellie's phone before he'd attacked her. The black SUV, the threats, the drunken rage. It all came pouring out, a sordid story of hatred and cowardice. Hale had targeted Lila because she represented everything he despised. A young woman unapologetically in love, living her truth in a town that didn't always understand. The case was reopened and the town buzzed with shock, but for Clara, Emma, and Ellie it was more than justice, it was closure. Back at Lila's place, the restaurant felt different, lighter somehow, as if Lila's spirit had finally found peace. Clara and Emma worked side by side, their grief no longer a wall between them but a bridge. They hung a new photo on the wall, a candid shot of Lila and Emma laughing, taken by Ellie during one of her brief stays with Lila. It joined the other mementos, a testament to love that endured beyond loss. Ellie recovered slowly, spending her days at the restaurant, helping with small tasks as her strength returned. Clara watched her closely, seeing glimpses of Lila in her gestures, her quiet kindness. She wasn't Lila, but she carried a piece of her, a connection Clara hadn't expected to find. One evening as they closed up, Ellie paused at the chalkboard menu, her fingers tracing Lila's handwriting. "She'd be proud of this place," she said softly. Clara smiled, her heart full. "She'd be proud of you too." Emma too found a new purpose. She started a local support group for LGBTQ youth, using Lila's place as a meeting space. The kids came in droves, drawn by the warmth of the restaurant and the story of Lila's life. Clara watched them laugh and share, their voices filling the space with hope. She thought of Lila, who'd always dreamed of a place where everyone felt safe, and knew they'd made her vision real. One night as the restaurant emptied, Clara, Emma, and Ellie sat together at a corner table, sharing a bottle of wine. The jukebox played Lila's favorite song, and for a moment, it felt like she was there with them. "I used to think love was just pain," Ellie said, her voice quiet. "But Lila showed me it could be more." "You all did." Clara's eyes met Emma's and they smiled, their hands brushing under the table. Love had brought them here through grief and truth, to this moment of healing. The restaurant thrived, not just as a business but as a beacon. People came from miles away, drawn by the story of Lila's place. A restaurant built on love, loss, and redemption. Clara and Tom welcomed them all, Their hearts opened wider than ever before. Emma became a partner in the business, her vision shaping its future, while Ellie stayed on, finding a home in the place Lila had inspired. As winter settled over the town, Clara stood outside Lila's place, watching snow dust the street. The sign glowed warmly, a promise kept. She thought of Lila, of the daughter she'd loved and lost, and the family she'd gained, Emma, Ellie, and the community they'd built. The pain of Lila's death would never fully fade, but it had transformed into something else. A legacy of love, fierce and unbroken. Inside, Emma called her name and Clara turned, her heart lighter than it had been in years. She stepped back into the warmth, the clink of glasses and the murmur of voices wrapping around her like an embrace. Lila's place was more than a restaurant now. It was a testament to who Lila had been, and who they'd all become in her memory. And somewhere Clara knew Lila was smiling.